Jaya Radha Gopinath Radha Gopinath Radhe. Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Radhe Jaya Shri Radhe. O Jaya Vrishabhanu Nandini Radhe Radhe Vrishabhanu Nandini Radhe Radhe. O Radhe 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 Radhe. Jai Shishi Guru Garanga Gandhavika Girihari Radha Gopinath Ju Ki Jai Sachinandana Gaurahari Ki Jai Shila Gurudev Ki Jai Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Astotar Shishimad Shila Bhaktivedanta Narayana Goswami Maharaj Ki Jai Jai Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Astotar Shishimad Shila Bhaktivedanta Swami Shila Prabhupada Ki Jai Rupa Nuga Guru Varga Ki Jai Anantakota Vaishnava Vrinda Ki Jai Gaura Premanande Hari Hari Om Bhaginat Mirandasya Gyananjala Shalakaya Chakshu Unmilitam Jena Tasmai Shri Guruve Namaha Guruve Gaurachandraya Radhikaya Taralaye Krishnaya Krishna Bhaktaya Tarabhaktaya Namo Namaha Yam Pravajantamana Petyam Apeti Krityam Dvaipayano Viraha Katara Ajuhava Putreti Tammayatayo Taravo Benedustam Sarvabhutam Munimanatoshmi Bhaktiya Vihina Aparada Lakshai Shiptascha Karmadi Taranga Mahadye Kripa Maitvam Sharanam Prapana Vrinde Namaste Charana Ravindam Vajami Radham Aravinda Netram Smarami Radham Madhurashmitasyam Vadami Radham Karuna Baradram Tato Mamanasti Katyena Chapi. I first of all offer millions and millions of Dandavat pranams unto the lotus feet of my beloved Gurudev. Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Asto Tadasara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Narayan Goswami Maharaj. And the same again millions and millions of times unto the lotus feet of our beloved Nitya Leela Pravishta Om Asto Tadasara Shishimad Srila Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada and all the Vaishnava devotees of the Lord and Dandavat pranams. Is that loud enough? Everybody?
A little bit more.
More loud? Okay? Okay. So, this morning we discussed so many topics, particularly the 2nd canto, Srimad Bhagavatam. Although I also described all of the chapters in the 1st canto, just briefly, I just enumerated them all. So this evening you've all got those sheets, which I think will be very helpful for following the sequence. So our idea is to study as much of the sequence as we have time for, but to be constantly assured of what is the conclusion, what is the purpose of our study, where are we actually anxious to attain, what is that place we're trying to reach. So this place, of course, is in Sri Vrindavan Dham. This is the place where Vyasadeva was feeling separation from when he was speaking about his despondent condition to Narad. It was that heart being in Vrindavan Dham. Being in Vrindavan Dham, of course, doesn't just mean physically being in the Dham, but it means being with, in heart, Sri Radha and Krishna in the groves of... you can hear it?
It was better before.
But some echo.
Oh. Hare Krishna. So, we're going to again come to this Venu Gita. So last night we read through the introduction at quite length to make a solid, the introduction of Venu Gita we read last night. You weren't here? Didn't listen?
I wasn't there.
This is what we discussed and read most of
We were
last
going
night.
to do tonight?
Huh?
I thought we were going to do tonight.
No, tonight we're going to read the Venu Gita. Last night we studied the introduction to give us the eligibility to enter into the Venu Gita fearlessly. So Srila Gurudev has cleared all those obstacles very simply by his explanations. And basically we were discussing how this one verse at the end of the Rasa Panchadaya section, Shukadev Goswami is saying, Vikriti tam brajavadubi tam cha Vishnu. This verse is very, very important. It's pivotal, it's essential, because we're hearing these topics in a public place and we need to be assured of the license to do that, so to speak. Because there are so many Sahajiya groups, there are so many people who want to jump in an unbona fide way just straight to this 10th canto. So Srila Gurudev is explaining very clearly the necessity of hearing these topics, but simultaneously, when we read in other sections of Gurudev's instructions, of the importance of understanding very clearly what is Tattva Siddhanta. So this we are discussing mostly in the morning in relationship to the Bhagavatam. So in the evening we'll discuss something of Rasa Tattva, and then we'll read. This evening I was thinking just to read directly from Srila Gurudev's commentary, from his, this is called the Ananda Vardini Yakya, the commentary that increases pleasure. So I was going to read this. I remember one time in Badger, when Gurudev had just put out the Gita Govinda, and all the devotees were glorifying him in various ways. And I remember Gopinandini stood up and she glorified Srila Gurudev, and she glorified the Gita Govinda, and then she said at the end of her speech that, and may this never be spoken publicly. I remember very well, and Gurudev laughed. So that type of literature should not be spoken publicly. And these commentaries also are very intimate in places. But we can read the pertinent parts and we can see what is the mood of the Brijabasis, the Brajaramanis, towards Sri Krishna. This is what we have to understand most deeply. We are following in the footsteps of the beloved gopis. Why? Because they have the most anurag, they have the most sweetness and heart and dedication to Sri Krishna. So we want to be influenced by their moods and bhavs. This is our prayer, to be following in the footsteps of the gopis of Vrindavan. This is the heart of the Gaudiya Siddhanta. So only in this small section we talked about this morning, only 26 chapters is spoken in the whole Srimad Bhagavatam about the Vrindavan pastimes. Nevertheless, they are so powerful that they influence actually our vision on all of the rest of the Bhagavatam. For example, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur, he writes a number of commentaries on the Srimad Bhagavatam. And in his Rasa Vichar commentary on the first verse, for example, in the first verse, there's one line, it says, Tejas Mridyam Veni, which is talking about fire, earth, and water. So in the Tattva Vichar, this is understood as fire, earth, and water. But in the Rasa Vichar, Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes that this Tejas, this fire, is none other than Sri Radha. And the water is the Jamuna Devi. And the earth is Giriraj Govardhan. So just in a moment, he transforms the whole of the Bhagavatam into being a Rasik presentation, which actually is what it is. This ultimately, so unless we're very familiar with these last chapters, or with these chapters from the 10th Canto, then we don't get the full impression of the other 9 cantos. Because as I said yesterday, Gurudev has spoken that every letter of every verse contains Sri Radha's moods. So how to understand this? Of course, initially we just read it through with a different impression, and then we get influenced by the 10th canto, and then we go back again and begin reading it again and again. This is the nature of this tremendous literature. So this evening we've been blessed with having a copy of the full Srimad Bhagavatam with us. Srila Narada Muni said, in any house where there's a Srimad Bhagavatam, then I will always visit. If there's no Bhagavatam, I will not visit that house. So we must always make sure that we have in our homes this Srimad Bhagavatam. It's our wealth, it's our property. It's not the property of the Sahajiyas who discuss these topics in a very sensational type of a way. It's our property, Srila Bhaktivedanta has said. So I want to read this evening from the 7th shloka. And I was thinking that we could just gloss through the whole beautiful book and say many wonderful things about it, but I thought I would prefer myself just to go more deeply into perhaps one verse, and that one verse will color our impression of all the rest of the verses and chapters, discussing these same, because Yugal Gita is also very similar to Venu Gita, and it has the same sort of moods portrayed by the gopis. So I'll just chant this 7th shloka. So if you have the book, by the way, Jamuna has some of these copies. She's offering them at 150. If anybody wants to purchase a copy, even before we start, you can purchase a copy. You want a copy? Yes, you can pass one back to me. You what?
That was the first book that I got in 1999.
Really?
Yeah, people was attracted to this book.
Wow.
Different edition.
Very nice, very nice, very nice, very nice. Yes, this picture on the front is the picture that we're just going to describe now. Gopya uvacha akshavantam phalam idam na paramam vidamaha sakyaha pashun anuviveshayator vyasayaya vaktram brajesha suteyo anuvenu justam yaiva nipitam anurakta kataksha moksham. So, the translation: the gopis said to their most intimate Sakis, "O Sakis, just see, how can we find words to express the indescribable fortune of ones whose eyes behold the imperishable beauty of the 2 sons of Maharaj Nanda, Sri Krishna and Baladev, as they enter Vrindavan with the cowherd boys and cows. They hold their flutes to their lips and smile mildly while lovingly showering sidelong glances upon us. At that time, we drink the sweetness of their faces." So we've understood up till this point that a whole atmosphere has been set by Shukadev Goswami in narrating this description. He's first of all described the atmosphere in Vrindavan of the season, the beautiful autumn season. And then gradually, he's building an appreciation of Krishna's flute. And it's described in the commentaries that because of their total absorption in Krishna, by hearing that flute song and exchanging with themselves, that they actually begin to see a spurti. So that spurti is the picture on the cover. They see Krishna like this. Krishna is walking somewhat behind Baladev so that he can reciprocate with his beloved gopis who are in the kunjas beside the royal path where all the cows and cowherd boys are going. Now it's interesting to understand from the teachings of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu how Mahaprabhu himself, he wants to experience, because he's already experienced as Krishna going to the cow grazing pastures, but he hasn't at all really got a clear idea or understanding of what are the gopis seeing. So this verse in particular is referenced when Mahaprabhu, he wants to see Krishna on his way to the cow grazing fields. He wants to see through the eyes, the love-filled eyes of the gopis. He wants to experience himself. He doesn't know exactly the extent of their anurag for him at that time. He's reciprocating to some degree, but he doesn't know completely their sentiments towards him. So he's understanding the height and glory of their anurag towards him. But he himself wants to taste this. This is the third desire that Mahaprabhu wants to experience, that sweetness that Sri Radha experiences by receiving the wonderful sweetness of Krishna's love. So he wants to experience this. Mahaprabhu has three desires. The first desire, you remember, Jamuna?
Yes.
Tell me.
He desires to understand the glories of Radha's love.
To understand the glories of Radha's love. This is why Krishna, Gauranga Mahaprabhu, has advented. To understand the glories of Radha's love. And then second,
He desires to relish his own transcendental qualities, his sweet qualities especially.
astonishing qualities.
Astonishing, sweet.
Yes, adbhuta madhurima. This adbhuta means astonishing.
That she relishes because of her love for him, of course.
Yes, he wants to relish his own qualities through the eyes of his devotee, his highest devotee, Sri Radha. He doesn't, like sugar, cannot taste its own sweetness. Similarly, Krishna doesn't know how sweet he is, but other people tasting the sweetness of Krishna can experience that. So he wants to taste himself. This is why Sri Krishna advents as Gauranga Mahaprabhu. Now, in this particular sense, in relationship to this verse, he wants to taste the sweetness of the gopis' darshan of him on his way to the cow grazing fields. So this third desire,
He desires to relish the happiness she feels, the Radha feels, when she experiences the sweetness of his love for her.
very good. So we should know these desires very clearly, and then we can fully appreciate who is Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. Because without the mercy of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we can't understand really any of this on any profound level. Before the advent of Mahaprabhu, what could they appreciate? Something, because Sridhar Swami had given his commentary, other acharyas had given their commentary, but this mood of parakya had not been fully reconciled in the hearts of most sadhaks. A few Siddha Purushas would have understood these verses, but it was very much confidential topics. These topics weren't entered into. But now we see everywhere. You just walk in the marketplace, you can buy a copy of Venu Gita with this tremendously rasik commentary by Srila Gurudev. You can go anywhere. And as time goes on, more and more persons will be describing these pastimes. So we must be very sure of who is giving us the stamp of authority to hear these pastimes. It's none other than Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, who is coming, who has, through his associate Sri Rupa Goswami, and passing down through the acharyas to our beloved Gurudev. He is giving us the passport, so to speak, to enter into these topics. So it would be very miserly if we didn't actually take advantage of that gift that he's given us. Not only relishing it personally, but also reading it with others, also trying to understand how did Gurudev present it. What is the correct way to present it? So many mistakes perhaps will be there, but we're always trying to learn that. We're trying to understand how can I best, because if we don't present these topics, how will people even remotely begin to get these moods of the gopis? They are so profound. They are so love-laden. How can we understand these? But in the congregation of devotees, we can perhaps understand a little bit of them. So we'll try, by Srila Gurudev's mercy, to enter into this particular verse, but understanding from the very beginning that it is by the causeless mercy of Mahaprabhu that we can enter at all into this topic. He wanted to know the moods and feelings of the gopis himself. He was so greedy that he advents again. Krishna only comes once in a day of Lord Brahma, in something, 8,460,000,000 years. He comes, and Mahaprabhu always comes straight after, in that same Chatu Yuga. Mahaprabhu will always advent. So it's only once, though, in a day of Lord Brahma.
But Krishna has tasted these things in the form of Mahaprabhu at in another day of Brahma at some other point.
Not the same way. It's described as Naveen Krishna. It's described as ever, ever fresh. It's never the same. He's asking, but Krishna has tasted these things in a previous day of Lord Brahma, when he came as Krishna and performed his Vrindavan pastimes. It's a beautiful question, but we should understand that the structure of that advent will have been similar, but the moods are always increasing. They cannot remain static for it to be prem at all. It must be constantly increasing, evolving in its beauty and height. For us, it is perhaps the first time we as conditioned souls are eligible to hear these topics. So we are hearing them on one level. But for Sri Krishna himself, he is relishing ever fresh new aspects of these topics himself personally. So Mahaprabhu in other days of Lord Brahma will be tasting this, but with a new relish, with a different relish every time. This is the nature of prem, the nature of love, that it's constantly increasing, it's constantly exploding. It has to be a reality. If it was static, then it wouldn't be ecstatic. So it's ecstatic, it's not static. Ecstatic means it's constantly increasing. So this is how I would answer that question, but it's a good question. I'll ask some other devotees and see what they say also, because there will be many answers to these type of questions. Okay, so I'm going to read myself because I have the microphone. If it was a microphone we could pass around, then everyone else could also read. But so now reading the commentary of Srila Gurudev. Without the grace of the gopis, who are filled with deep Mahabhav and Anurag, it is impossible to understand the words they spoke, to express the feelings overflowing from their hearts. That is why Srila Jiva Goswami, Srila Vishnu Chakravarti Thakur, and other commentators have prayed to the gopis for their blessings. Srila Jiva Goswami has written in Vaishnav Toshani, Yasam Buddhyate, I can't see that, Vagarto Yashamev Prasar Tata Gopi Prapadyate Na Yabi Sa Gini Gani Virasya Jita. I take shelter of the lotus feet of the gopis. By their mercy only can one understand the meaning of their words in the Venu Gita. What more can I say about their glories? Even Swayam Bhagavan Sri Krishna, the depth of whose heart is unfathomable, is constantly conquered by their love. It's very, very beautiful. Beautiful verse and description. And we see that Mahaprabhu Krishna himself had to go to the Tota Gopinath garden to hear this from Sri Radha, because he didn't know the depth of their love. So he heard this topic directly from Sri Radha himself. This is the glory of Sri Radha. Mahaprabhu has come to proclaim the glory of Sri Radha. Actually, ultimately, if we describe it, this entire material world is nothing except a glorification of Sri Radha. In its ultimate analysis, everything is a glorification of Sri Radha. So here in particular, appreciating these moods is glorifying Sri Radha, which is just what Sri Krishna wants to do. Sri Vishnath Chakravarti Thakur has written in his commentary, Sa'artha Darshani, in this way: Venu Nad Sudaya Vristaya Nishkamyayokti maduritam. Yasham na payayamsha Krishna na eva nagati. The shower of nectar in the form of Krishna's Venu made the gopis delirious, forcing them to come out of their houses to drink the sweetness of his voice. Those gopis are our only refuge. So it's described later on that when Krishna actually plays his flute, it's like he's expressing all his heart's moods within that sound vibration. This is the remarkable speciality of Krishna's flute playing. In Sri Chaitanya Charitamrita, Adi 495, the beautiful nature and form of the crown jewel of all gopis, Sri Radhika, has also been described. Jagat Mohan Krishna Tamera Mohini Ataiva Samstere Para Takorani. That very Sri Krishna, who attracts the entire universe with his beauty, qualities, pastimes, nature, opulence, sweetness, and other aspects, is himself attracted and rendered helpless by the unparalleled and unsurpassed love of Vrishabhanu Nandini Srimati Radhika, who is the most supremely accomplished of all in the art of love and affection, who is the embodiment of Mahabhav, and who is extremely dear to Sri Krishna. Indeed, she is the goddess of he who is the God of the entire creation. Therefore she is all in all. Without her causeless mercy, it is not possible to understand the depth of her moods and words. And for this reason, the commentators have prayed to her worshipable lotus feet for her causeless mercy. So without her mercy, it's saying, so in other words, without the mercy of Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, Mahaprabhu takes the kanti and bhav of Sri Radha, and he's tasting that himself. Therefore, he can explain these moods. He can explain ultimately the mood of Parakya. Without that mercy of Mahaprabhu, then it's not possible to enter into this. If we ever hear these topics described without solid reference to Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, we should become a little shy. Because actually this is not our line. Our line is to hear and have everything reconciled fully by the teachings of Mahaprabhu. He gives us our stamp, our eligibility to appreciate these correctly. Otherwise we can become sensually attracted and motivated by these topics and lose the actual essence of the feelings that the gopis are experiencing in their selfless affection and attraction to Sri Krishna. Hearing Krishna's alluring Venunad, the gopis become extremely restless in their desire to meet with him. Sitting in seclusion in their own homes, they were discussing the Venunad with their Priyanam Sakhis. While looking with great thirst towards the path Krishna took on his way to the forest. So in other words, this is all like in separation mood we described yesterday. I described yesterday something of the nature of Purvarag. Purvarag actually has three categories to it. There is Proda, then there's Samanjasaha, and there's Sadharana. These three different stages of Purvarag. So this Proda is like this Samartha Rati. If you understand what is Samartha Rati is the very special exalted Rati that only the gopis have. It's totally selfless. It's described like a Kaustubha Mani. Kaustubha Mani only hangs on the neck of Krishna, and only the gopis have access to that Kaustubha Mani. So it's the most precious of all the different types of Rati. This Samartha Rati, it has not a single tinge of selfishness in it. And then below that Rati is this Samanjasa Rati. This is described as the Rati of the queens of Dwarka. The queens of Dwarka, their affection only goes up to the stage of Anurag. The gopis goes up to the stage of Mahabhav. These descriptions are clearly written about in Pujapad Bon Maharaj's Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu. This Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, we can purchase, and there he's written very clearly descriptions of all these stages of from prem to Mahabhav, very beautifully. So you should see if you can get a copy of that. Srila Gurudev was very happy with that particular edition, and he actually wanted it translated into Hindi, because Pujapad Ban Maharaj, this is the associate of Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada. I think he left this world in the 70s, something like that. So this is a very good reference for you when you're wanting to understand more of this Rasa Tattva aspect. So in this mood of Samanjasa, this is the rati that the queens of Dwarka have. The queens of Dwarka, their love is divided into 12. They have 10 sons, 1 daughter, and Krishna. So their rati is somewhat compromised. We have to put these lights on because I'm on stage. If that's all right. For the effects, whatever. Anyway, so this rati of the queens is somewhat compromised by their 10 sons and their 1 daughter and Krishna. So they get a 12th. Krishna gets a 12th, Gurudev describes. And then the other type of rati, this Sadarani rati, is the rati of Kubja. Kubja has that attraction when she sees Krishna directly. The queens, like Rukmini, they only heard about Krishna. The gopis themselves, they're completely related to Krishna from birth. So their relationship is totally different. But these 3 types of rati we should become familiar with. Srila Gurudev would talk about them regularly. So the first type of rati, the lowest type of rati, is called Sadarani. And this is the rati, or the attraction, that Kubja had to Krishna. When Krishna entered Mathura, Kubja, she was carrying a tray of sandal paste and scent. And Krishna was attracted to that and requested her to, decorate himself, even though this was for actually Kamsa. So Kubja was very attracted immediately to Krishna, and she beautifully attracted him with this sandal paste and scent. And she was feeling very strong attraction to Krishna. And at that time, Krishna, out of his mercy, he put his hand under her chin and straightened her up. Kubja is bent like a hunchback, so she'd never had any sort of conjugal relationship of any sort. And Krishna was the first attractive personality that she'd witnessed, Gurudev describes. So, but this type of rati is inspired by the sight of Krishna. And then the second type of rati, this Sadarani rati of the queens of Dwarka, is by hearing. Rukmini, she only heard the glories of Krishna to be fully attracted to him. And then she sent her messenger, that Brahman, saying that she was ready to give up her life unless Krishna kidnapped her. And then the Samartha rati, this third type of rati. So now in Purvarag, these same types of rati are referenced. They're slightly different terminologies, but the first type of Purvarag, which is the same as Samartha rati, we should gradually learn these terminologies. It will be very helpful for us in diving deeper into an appreciation of these moods. So this Prodha Purvarag, it's described as it contains all the 10 principal moods of the gopis, of their sanchari bhavs, to the extreme. And then the second type of Purvarag is called this Samanjasa Purvarag, and this is less than the first. And then the third type, this Sadarana, it's called, the third type, is a different degree of Purvarag. So it's so merciful that our acharyas have described in such intense detail these emotional degrees of attraction to Krishna, because by these descriptions it shows us just the enormity of the gopis' full emotional attraction to Krishna. it shows us through this gradation of comparisons. It's very wonderful to have that. This is called Rasa Tattva. Rasa Tattva is different from Lila. It's like the bridge that takes us into Lila. It's very important to become familiar, something, with this Rasa Tattva, as I explained yesterday in the Jaiva Dharma. I've just actually finished narrating it, and I haven't quite finished the editing, but it should be ready very soon. And then you can actually listen to all of these descriptions and gradually try and enter more into these topics of what is Rasa Tattva, and then appreciate these moods and feelings even more. So all the acharyas are giving us all this opportunity to drink this sweetness of these leelas, these Vrindavan leelas. So they were feeling this anticipation, and they were looking with great thirst towards the path Krishna took on his way to the forest. As soon as they started to talk about the lovely melody of the flute, they saw with their eyes above a vision of Krishna's enchanting form and were overwhelmed in love. Their throats choked up, their hearts stopped beating, and they stood silent for some time. After their bhav was pacified a bit, they patiently concealed their inner mood by indirectly hinting at Krishna's sweetness. You see, they're still shy, even with each other. This is such a profound experience of affection and attraction that they're feeling. Even with their dearest friends, they cannot release that shyness. This is how powerful is this attraction, this rag that they're feeling. They spoke with each other. Aksanbatam phalam idam na param vidama. Dear Sakis, you have chained yourselves in the net of household life and are wasting your eyes and other senses that the Creator has given you. That is why you should try to escape from the prison of your houses as soon as possible. Come running with us to Vrindavan, and then make your eyes, other senses, and your very lives successful by obtaining darshan of something indescribable and extraordinarily amazing. With this intent, the shloka Akshanvatam Phalam Idam has been spoken. So Gurudev is explaining this very beautifully. I want to jump ahead a little bit here to, in my book it's on page 38. It's about 4 or 5 pages on. We're still the same verse, sloka 7. Gurudev explains very clearly here. So you can read these other parts yourselves.
We have another.
What is yours begin with?
Being shy, Saki, you still hesitate to go near Brajendranandan.
48, second from the bottom.
48, second from the bottom in the newer edition. Okay, so I hope that by speaking this now, that you will become inspired to go to your places and read more deeply the rest of this beautiful, these verses, and then be inspired in your contemplation and your thoughts of the beauty of Sri Krishna and his the love that the gopis show to him. So you can read these yourselves. So I'm going to start here. Being shy, Saki, you still hesitate to go near Brajendranandan. But if you approach him a little, the movement of his eyebrows will break your regard for public opinion, self-control, and all the rest. And drawing you closer to him, he will force you to drink the nectar of his lips. At that time, drinking the honey of his lotus face and your pran priyatma, your life's beloved, all of us will bring our lives along with our eyes to perfection. All the Brajramanis were immersed in bhav, each and every one having her own particular special mood. It is not possible for the heart to grasp all these individual bhavs, but it is possible to understand a few of them. Among all the Brajramanis, Srimati Radhika, Chandravali, and the other principal gopis are always the most eager to meet Sri Krishna and play with him. This eagerness, of course, is the qualification for Raganuga Bhakti. We sing in the 5th verse every single morning of this Guru Vastikam. Shri Radhika Madhava Yorapara, Madhurya Lila Guna Rupanana. That Guru is very moment by moment intensely greedy to render service to the divine couple. So how can we incorporate this mood personally into our own lives, into our own chanting? If we are chanting sufficiently, that will give us the intelligence and the enthusiasm to begin this path of Rag Marg. The chanting must be there, and then when that intensity begins to rise, then we'll be very anxious not to waste a moment of time. I've mentioned already these different stages of bhav. The first is kshantiya. We'll feel very peaceful in our the way that our lives are being conducted. We're very settled. This is the first, it's described as, what do you call it, symptom of bhav, this kshantiya. Then avyakta kalatvam, not wasting any time. That means not engaging in anything that is going to distract your mind away from the beautiful devotion to Sri Radha and Krishna directly. We have to do, of course, all types of daily activities, but still in our hearts we're longing to increase the time my consciousness can be absorbed in these topics. If we have that desire, the power of Nam will fulfill that desire, where all you have is a simple room and all you have to do is to chant and read. That's not an easy place to be unless you've taken this path very seriously. You can't do it artificially. You'll just go a little nutty. You will. I've been there. It's what happens. You have to gradually balance your own personal tendencies, and every single person is different. Every single person has a different resonance, so to speak, like a different musical instrument. Not all can play the same way. So we have to balance. Some will have to be very active in their seva. Others can be more sedentary in their seva. Some perhaps will be more presenting this knowledge with their seva. Some will be writing. So all different types of seva. But the essence and the heart of the seva, if it's focused on the intention of developing more my attraction for Radha and Krishna, then it's successful, then it's pure, and no other consideration should be there. So if we're praying for that time when we can become more exclusively focused on these pastimes, and by Guru Dev's mercy, that will manifest very easily. But we have to be cautious and not be too fanatical is a word that comes to mind, or we mustn't be too crazy about it, because you're dealing with the mad mind. The mad mind has been conditioned for countless births. It's very delicate. It needs to be gradually brought under a bridle. It needs to be controlled. So beautiful scriptures like Upadeshamrita, they give us that complete process of how to reach Radhakund, Vacho Vegam, Manasakroda Vegam, etc. all the way through, bringing us gradually closer and closer. But throughout this practice, if this intention is constantly, sincerely growing, to develop my pure service. I am a pure servant of Radha and Krishna. This is what I am. But I've become covered by these material considerations from time immemorial. But my actual nature is inclined to that Krishna Seva Vasana. This is my reality. This is my real nature. So I'm trying to connect with something that's already there. It's not something that is going to become new. It's not a new thing. What's that? Kriti sadhya bhavet sadhya bhavasa sadhanat nitya siddhyasya bhavasya. This is eternally residing in our hearts. It's eternally there. So we're trying to connect with our original self. This is our purpose. And by hearing these pastimes, then some very deep sentiments of attraction will begin to gradually manifest in the heart. Yes, so I was commenting that even Srila Gurudev daily, we're taking his mercy to follow this path in our prayers to Gurudev. Their maidservants, however, like Sri Rupa Manjari and others, are not eager to meet with Sri Krishna themselves, but rather they only desire to arrange Radhika's meetings with him. In this way, the pleasure her followers taste is millions and millions of times greater. This is a very important part that Srila Gurudev is saying here about specifically Manjari Bhav. Previously, Gurudev was talking with his emphasis on the love-filled moods of the Sakhis directly. There are two types of moods in the Sakhis. There is Sambhog Ichamayi and Tat Bhav Ichamayi. This Sambhog Ichamayi means that we have a desire to meet and enjoy directly with Krishna. But this Tat Bhav Ichamayi means that we want to become completely submerged in a mood to Sri Radha, and we become tadatmik with Sri Radha's moods actually when she is with Krishna. So what Gurudev is describing here at this part is the moods of the Manjaris. They're not thinking in their Purvarag condition, hearing that flute sound, oh, when will I come before Krishna? They are thinking, oh, when will my Swamini, when will she come to Krishna? So this is their mood, and this is the mood of the Gaudiyas. This is our line. It's different from what I've just described in the last 15-20 minutes of the moods of the Sakhis. So Gurudev is breaking that mood here with this paragraph. He's very clearly saying how we're looking to actually bring Sri Radha pleasure. I'll just read this part again so you can see clearly. Their maidservants, however, like Sri Rupa Manjari and others, are not eager to meet with Sri Krishna themselves, but rather they only desire to arrange Sri Radhika's meetings with him. In this way, the pleasure her followers taste is millions and millions of times greater. This particular kind of Gopi Bhav, called Ulasarati, is especially sweet and has been brilliantly analyzed in Priti Sandarbha and in the commentaries on Ujjvala Nilamani. So there's a verse here from Bhakti Rasamrita Sindhu, and the explanation is as follows. Generally devotees in the same mood, Swajatiya, who are enriched with similar desires, Vasana Vashishta, naturally share Surit Bhav, intimate friendship with each other. That is why the Priti and Rati, love and affection that Lalita and other Sakhis have for Sri Radha is called Surit Rati. When their Surit Rati is the same as or slightly less than their Krishna Rati, affection towards Krishna, it is called Sanchari Bhav. In other words, when this Surit Rati becomes equal to the waves in the ocean of their prominent affection for Krishna, then it is a Sanchari Bhav. A Sanchari Bhav, what is a Sanchari Bhav? It's a temporary, transitory Bhav, as I described yesterday. It comes on the lake of the Sthayi Bhav. The Sthayi Bhav is the essential Rati that the Sakhi has that Madhurya, that Sringara Ras. And these 33 in number, these waves, they come through to make this lake very dynamic. If there's no waves, it's a little flat. And we see many times in Radha and Krishna's relationship, like for example, when Radha and Krishna are walking through the forest, when Krishna has left the Rasa Leela and he's come to pacify Sri Radha's mind, and Radha has been pacified. Now Sri Radha is in a mood called Swadina Bhartika. She is the heroine, she's controlling her lover. And Krishna is in a submissive mood at this time. This is called Dakshin Bhav. He's very submissive to Sri Radha. And they're walking beautifully through the forest. Now at one point here, Sri Radha desires the welfare of her darling Sakhis, who she knows are bereft without Krishna's association, or her association also. And when she thinks this, Krishna understands what she's thinking. So he wants to make some arrangement to separate. So how do they separate? This is to do with these different moods. So Krishna turns to Radha and he says, "Oh Radha, do you want to come to a flower bower? Or would you like to keep walking on the path?" At this point, what does Sri Radha do? She comes into a more submissive mood. This Dakshin mood, her Swadinartika has come down, and she says, "Oh my darling Krishna, I don't mind if I go to a flower bower or if I continue walking." So she's become like Krishna's mood in Dakshin. So at this point, these waves are not so extraordinary as they were previously. So then the mood comes down a little bit. So at this point, Krishna decides, "Oh, I leave." And he says, "Oh, my Priyatma, just sit on my shoulder." Because Radha, she says, "Oh, now I'm tired. Just sit on my shoulder and I will take you somewhere." And at this point, Krishna, he disappears. So we see that these moods, they became the same. This is how Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur describes this pastime. So in considering these different bhavs or moods, we can understand from this example how when these sanchari bhavs, because this is what it's talking about here, these sanchari bhavs, they're rising on this lake of these sthai bhav, these different, but they're only transitory. Sometimes they're feeling great disparagement, or sometimes they're feeling tremendous humility. They are all different, 33 beautifully described. So at another time we can explain more of these topics. However, in the case of Manjari Bhavs, their Suridrati for Radha and everything connected with her, which abundantly exceeds their Krishna Rati and which constantly increases by the moment due to their full absorption in it, is called Bhav Ulasarati, despite being a Sanchari Bhav. This is a special feature of Madhurya Ras. Of the 5 types of Sakhis, only the Nitya Sakhis and Pran Sakhis, who are known as Manjaris, have this Bhav Ulas Rati as their permanent emotion, Sthai Bhav. They nurture an abundance of sneha, tender affection for Radhaji. So Srila Gurudev is most generous, giving us this insight into the moods of the Manjaris, because somebody may well ask a question, well, so many of these descriptions are of the Purvarag, describing the hearts of the Sakhis towards Krishna. But what about these personalities, these Manjaris, who they don't have that rati towards Krishna, but it's towards Sri Radha? How is that? We can understand these topics by chanting. If tomorrow you hear tonight some of these topics like this, then if you take some notes and in the morning while you're chanting, you can meditate on these topics. And very often clarity will come from the chanting and from your personal meditation. This is what bhajan is about. It's about trying to appreciate more fully these loving sentiments of the gopis towards Krishna. But not just the Sakis, but the Manjaris also. So Gurudev is describing specifically these Manjaris. Actually, there's only this Vilap Kusumanjali practically that we have that describes this Manjari Bhav. So I don't know of any other scripture that really describes this Manjari Bhav more. Many literatures reference it, but the descriptions that Raghunath Das has given are the most that we actually have. So this is and Gurudev has written such a wonderful commentary on most of the verses, or spoken a commentary on most of the verses of this Vilap Kusumanjali. So gradually, through the inspiration of chanting, through the inspiration of hearing these topics, then gradually, some greater greed will come into our consciousnesses to connect more fully with these pastimes. And this is the purpose of Srimad Bhagavatam. This is to take us back to that highest place of spiritual reality, Goloka Vrindavan. This is the purpose, the whole purpose and intention of all of the descriptions in the Bhagavatam. Of course, it's very, very broad, and this Manjari Bhav is actually very exclusive. It is not so many who will actually, even after hearing these topics, develop some enthusiasm for studying Rasa Shastra and for reading regularly these commentaries on these Leela pastimes from the 10th Canto. We need to encourage each other to do this because this is our goal. Don't think, oh, now I'm just in this body and I'm waiting and I'm accumulating plenty of sukriti, and that in my next birth, then I will actually have a much better opportunity. We're not sure what our next birth will be. We don't know how it will be, but we are sure that we have opportunities in this birth. Actually, if we're always putting something into the future, we're not really capitalizing fully on the present. We're minimizing our opportunities for right now. Spiritual reality means this powerful present moment, right now. This is the actual spiritual reality. There is no such thing as the future or the past for the spirit soul. Spiritual time is eternal. It's right now. So it's right now at this point that we should be praying for the mercy of Srila Gurudev, praying for the mercy of the Vaishnavas, pray for the mercy of Nam, pray for the mercy of Sri Vrindavan, pray for the mercy of Yamuna Devi. Because when we ask for mercy, like we sing beautiful kirtan for Guru, Gurudev Kripa Bindu, Gurudev, give me your mercy. What sort of mercy do you want? What is your order for today? What is the mercy you want now? We should define the mercy that we want now. Not just ask, oh, give me some general mercy. But if you very carefully think, what is the mercy that I want today? Now, Srila Gurudev has said that as much as 5 times a day, we can review that place of request for mercy. In other words, our focus and understanding will gradually be transformed from day to day. It's not that, oh, this is my desire forever. No, you can, as many as 5 times in a day, check what is my desire. You might wake up in the morning, you might just be desiring something on the material platform. Oh, Krishna, please help my body. I've got such a cold and a cough and everything. I just want to get over this. You might be feeling like that. You might be feeling, oh, I want to do... And then gradually, as you chant more, read more, study more, then your desire will focus more and more and more. And if you ask for this directly, if you just say to Srila Gurudev, oh, please give me your mercy, he will give you some type of mercy. But if you go and specifically, oh, I want this mercy right now, Gurudev will consider that. And if we're eligible, he'll bestow it. But it will all come from His mercy. So it's our connection with Guru that has to grow simultaneously as our thirst and greed for these topics to enter more richly into our hearts. It is only Gurudev who will actually take away this what? Yes. I was describing previously, these stages, these symptoms of bhav. And I described already this Kshantya Avyakta Kalatvam. Then this Viraktya I described the other day, this detachment. And then Manasunyata means deep humility, no pride. But the next line is so beautiful. It's Ashabandha. Ashabandha. This extreme hope. Ashabandha. Great, great longing. Ashabandha is described in Jivadharma as that unswerving faith that Krishna must fulfill the desires of my bhajan. I am performing this bhajan, I am performing this seva, and Krishna must fulfill these desires. Unswerving faith, Ashabandha. It's such a beautiful contemplation. I was walking around for days recently just thinking, Ashabandha, Ashabandha. It's so sweet. It's like, all of our hopes completely fulfilled. What is your hope? What is your most cherished hope? It's helpful to bring the consciousness to contemplate. What is that? Don't leave it nebulous or kind of just wandering in the ether. Try and, by the help of Naam, focus, 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 focus. If we try to do that, all of the acharyas will come to our assistance. Even the devas will come to our assistance. We'll find extraordinary things to start happening around us, like miracles. This happens in the lives of the devotees. When they become properly situated and fixed, the devas want to help the devotees, most of the time. Sometimes they can throw an impediment. If they can see some obstacle that the devotee has, they'll bring that out, perhaps. But pray to all these personalities to give us courage and patience on this path. So tomorrow, was it all right for you all to hear this just directly from Gurudev? It was satisfying sufficiently? It was okay? No? I'm trying to create an interest in the topic for you to take home with you. So I'm reading parts of it to try and give you some inspiration to studying these scriptures simultaneously to the Bhagavatam. In the morning we're working through more in a tattvic way describing these truths, but we're building this foundation so that we can put this palace of rasa on that foundation. You understand? I don't want to take you off the edge of a cliff. If you tell me, no, Maharaj, we're not really resonating with the topic, reading, it's not really working, then we'll have to think of something else. But if it's okay, anyway, is it generally... Sorry? Yes, but if you just read the verses, I thought about this also. She's suggesting that we just read the verses and get the whole, picture, so to speak, which is very, very beautiful. But I was thinking, when I thought of that idea, that you're not going to actually connect with the deepest part. The deepest part comes from Gurudev's heart, and that's in the commentary. So I read through this commentary, and I thought that there were parts of it that we could read together and then go more deeply. But we should do all of these things, Didi. I mean, sometimes we should read all together, sometimes we should sing the verses together, but how much time in our lives do we actually have for this kind of... Only in Vrindavan do I feel most comfortable discussing these topics. I have never discussed these topics traveling in the West, because I think the eligibility, the people's minds are far too distracted. But when you live here, even for a day, something starts to quieten in the consciousness. What to speak of so many years? when you live here. The dust itself has an effect on the consciousness. The Jamuna, constantly there, has an effect on the consciousness. So with that eligibility, I feel that Gurudev is encouraging me to actually speak his commentary, his truths, because we are all sitting under his tutelage, trying to go forward in the way that he wanted us to go forward. Sometimes the mind won't want to go there. It'll become, think of so many different excuses. But he wants us for this. And collectively we know that's a fact. And we can try and encourage each other to dive more into these topics. So if you give me permission, then I'll read more of this a little bit tomorrow and see. Is that okay? So most people say it's okay. Yeah.
7 or 7:30?
Tomorrow morning we're going to start. I'll be here at 7 and we'll have some kirtan. There'll be kirtan here already. And we'll actually begin our class at 7:30. And we'll stop at around 8:30. Okay?
So we should change the slide.
Yes, please. Please, can you change that sign? But I think most of the people are becoming regular. This is the beauty, actually, of having a class of this nature, is that the same people can come every day. In many other parts of the world, you go and it's a new group every single night, and then you have to start right from the first canto all over again, and sort of building a whole again and again and again. So you get regulated just cutting the jungles of Mayavas, more or less. You never actually get to the heart of it. But with the same group, day by day by day by day, for me anyway, it's nectar, because I can go further and further and further along. We can actually go somewhere, rather than just be repeating so many things again. So I'm very grateful to you all for being here and coming, and having this opportunity to discuss these topics. So I'm getting so much from my
Thank
company.
you for putting it on YouTube so we can watch it again.
Hasn't gone up yet, but it's in motion. It will go. It will go. And I hope devotees will be inspired. I hope I haven't insulted any devotees from overseas by saying that, but they should all come to Vrindavan, because here is the nectar, and we are discussing it in a mood of that nectar. But perhaps each year I can have this opportunity to do this. Gopi, you have a question?
It seems like the mind is very dull, and unless you continually nourish it with something that you don't become familiar with it, and we have a tendency to forget because memory is very weak. So unless we continue to nourish it,
That's the dynamic, what I described of Prem. He's saying the necessity to continually nourish the mind. If you're just hearing the same thing again and again and again, then it's not sufficient to take it to another level. We have to keep nourishing. It's like the nature of Prem itself is nourished by what? It's nourished by vipralamba. It's nourished by separation. That's what nourishes Prem. If there was no separation, Prem wouldn't be nourished. That's why there are these two, Vipralamba and Sambho. They're both nourishing each other. Simultaneously, for our dull minds, we have to be nourishing it with ever fresh appreciations of our path, of how we are progressing, and specifically, more important than anything, hearing directly from these scriptures these descriptions of the speciality and height of the Gopis' prem for Krishna, because that is our aspiration, to acquire that Gopi Bhav. And so many years ago it seemed like so inaccessible. It seemed like such a ridiculous thing to even think about. But actually, by Gurudev's mercy, something of a reality of that is, manifesting in so many people's hearts. It's not just like Chinese anymore, So this shows the efficacy of our bhajan. It shows that by this continued chanting, even though it's difficult at times, but and continued hearing in particular, then remembrance of these topics will very easily manifest in the heart. Okay, Jai. Arti time. Dandavat pranams. Srila Gurudev ki Jai. Venu Gita ki Jai. Nantakota Vaishnava Vrinda ki Jai. Gaur Premanande. Vanchakalpatarubhyascha. Kripa Sindhavyacha. Paditanam Pavanibhyo Vaishnava.